Shenandoah Valley has hit a dry spell. While brown lawns don't look attractive, brown fields mean trouble for valley farmers. Hay yields are down. Corn yields are down. Beef cattle should be out grazing on green pastures, but since pastures aren't growing, farmers are having to supplement their feed. And joining us now to discuss the situation and possible help is Rockingham County Extension Agent John Wells. John, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Now, John, you're in the process of doing a drought damage assessment. What are you finding?
Well, in the farmers I've been able to poll so far, things are pretty dire. We've seen about a 25 to 60% reduction in first cutting hay yields over average. In terms of second cutting hay, it's almost 100%. There's simply no second cutting hay out there to be had. In terms of our row crop, corn yields in specific, we're looking at probably 50 to 90% reduction in yields for grain and silage on those crops at this point.
And what does that consist of, corn and other things?
Corn for grain and corn for silage would be particular, yes.
Okay. And that's the situation with the row crops. You look at those two things.
Yep.
Okay.
And then with respect to kind of supplemental feeding, or as you mentioned in your intro there, our pastures are pretty brown at this point. And so as these cows are looking for something to eat, now we're having to supplement feed to them at a rate of anywhere from about 10 to 100% of their nutritional needs.
So what are they supplementing it with since the pastures aren't?
Well, unfortunately, it's this year's stored feed is what we're having to rely on at this point. That would be hay either carried over from last year or hay that we made this spring that we intended to use this winter that we now have to feed to keep those animals healthy.
Okay. The other parts of the valley, are they seeing similar situation?
Yeah, I think the most recent NOAA drought assessment for the state had about 76% of the state under what they consider to be unusually or abnormally dry, not quite the drought declaration. And certainly those situations are mimicked up and down the Shenandoah Valley corridor, maybe even a little worse than the rest of the state.
Because those yields that you were saying are reductions are for Rockingham County that you were
That's
quoting.
correct, yes.
Okay. Now, what happens with your drought damage assessment that you're preparing? Where does that go?
Okay. I will submit that to the Board of Supervisors for them to consider at their board meeting coming up here next Wednesday with the recommendation that they adopt a resolution to declare the county a natural disaster due to drought conditions. And so that will be their consideration.
All right. And if they do that, then what happens with it at that point?
Okay. At that point, it's forwarded to our local Farm Service Agency office, where they will forward that request or recommendation up the line to both the state and national level offices to be considered for relief that might come from the federal government.
And I understand there also NOAA has to declare an area of
That's correct.
A drought too.
That's right. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration does a drought assessment on a nationwide basis. And at the current rate, we are just under that. We are a D0 declaration. We need to be D1 to be considered eligible for that.
Now, what can farmers get, though, if it is declared a drought area? What can they possibly look forward to as far as aid?
Okay. There are two programs that are available in the 08 Farm Bill as it was passed that would allow them for assistance either through low-interest loans from the government or maybe even a cash payment should they qualify for those specific programs.
And you and I talked earlier, I guess the low-interest loans aren't that popular because...
That's right. Most farmers are already carrying enough debt that additional debt is not necessarily
But obviously
attractive.
a cash payment would be much welcome, and I guess that is possible.
It is possible, and I'll be honest with you, I think the implications of this drought will be to add operating expense to an already struggling farm economy. So.
All right. Well, we'll see how this progresses. Rockingham County Extension Agent John Wells, thanks for joining us.